Belief is the enemy of knowing.
All right, man. Welcome to Crow 777 Radio. This is episode 410. Jason Lindgren is with me, and Kyle Denton is joining us from Tippecanoe Herbs. And I know that Jason and Rose are using the herbal products, and they are very impressed. Matter of fact, I've heard a lot of good things. I got some too as well. It's just that I'll catch everyone up. I haven't recorded a thing for 2 weeks. Jason and Rose and I knew my mom was coming to the end of the road, so we went like banshees and booked endless, 5, 6, 7, maybe 8 or 9 even episodes in advance. My mother passed away on the 21st of dementia. And at some point I will get on the air. Maybe it'll come up in this conversation. I don't know. And I'll try to offer what I learned, because it's a hell of a thing to deal with. And for people who don't know what to expect, maybe we can help them a little bit with what I learned. Anyhow, having said that, welcome, Jason.
Oh, and a very hot good morning.
Yeah, it's not hot here. Our friend in Michigan got snowed on just a few days ago, and we're still waking up in the 30s. But let's just jump right in. Welcome, Kyle.
Hello. Nice to be here.
Now, I'm still trying to focus my brain back in from all that's happened, but you had sent me a package of some of your things, right?
Yep, that's right. You got them. Good.
My wife loved the, I'm going to mess up because I've had so many things on my mind, but the one where you take a teaspoon, almost like it was cough syrup. It's a vinegary.
Yeah, it's a super berry cider, elderberries and some other berries infused into apple cider vinegar and honey. Yep.
She loves it.
Cool.
She has asthma and she's had problems with her lungs, and we noticed some benefits. So as we're getting in here, well, before we start, let's tell everyone where they can get your products. The reason you're here is because we know your stuff is good. And by the way, everyone listening, Kyle and his wife just had their first and moved into the natural birth, which they did at home, Kyle.
That's right. Yep.
So at home, having learned from the experiences that we've covered here, which is the whole reason we do it. But why don't you tell people how they can get a hold of you in any way that you choose? We're in hour 1. If you give out an email address, you might get pummeled. There you have it.
Cool. Yeah, pummel me. Tippecanoeherbs@gmail.com. I have a website, tippecanoeherbs.com. You'll find products, you'll find classes. I'm going to talk a lot about teaching about herbalism today. So if that interests you, you can find some classes there. And that's where you can find me. Or you can find me on the Beartaria Times app at Herbalist Bear. And that's where I'm in the comments, Herbalist Bear, and the Crow 777 website as well.
These are high quality herbal products made with someone who has skill. And I think that's worth mentioning. It's one thing to go out and buy some herbal products. It's a whole other thing to do it from someone with skill. Probably should spell Tippecanoe. And probably when this goes live, you should jump in the morning that we put episode 410 up and put links so people can see how you spell Tippecanoe.
You betcha. TIPPECANOEHERBS.com.
All right, Jason, give me a break today as I get back into this. Why don't you lead us in?
Well, let's start with the first point here, which is pretty simple. What does it mean to communicate with nature?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. And I'd like to speak about a practical guide to discerning the healing gifts of nature, specifically plant medicine, and applying common sense and developing spiritual senses as well as a form of communication with the natural world. So if I opened a discussion about plant communication with some random people, say in line at the post office, there might be someone who takes me as a guy who's into psychedelics and hemp beads and bongo drums and tarot cards and stuff like that. But I don't have anything against bongo drums. It's okay. I mean, actually, the Crow 777 theme song is one of my favorite songs. But I just wanted to reframe the idea of communicating with the natural world to a practical matter, and I'd say necessary, actually. And it doesn't mean that there are superpowers involved. Granted, I have a friend that's a sommelier, a wine taster. She can hold up a glass of wine and she can swish it around and she can tell you which region the grape came from, just by the way it clinks to the glass. And I have another friend who lives in Peru, and I was trained as an apprentice under a curandero and learned to sing songs of the plant spirits in a native language that only a few hundred people will speak. And there's the guest on your previous episode that was describing the Kalahari Bushmen and their amazing abilities. And there's this romanticization about the spiritual experience that another can have when it comes to like the natural world and plants. But about us lay people, it's like, where do regular people get that? And I'm here to claim my birthright and also offer that let you know that it's yours as well, to know the natural world. And from that, to know the creator of the natural world. The natural world is part of our inheritance that you talk about, Crow. And it was like, wait, Kyle, are you telling me that like the weeds and the thistles and the garden and all the stuff that we're like supposed to till and all this is like a gift from God? And it's like, yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. In a way, sometimes is not just there for us to take, but there's lessons in that too. And I think we have a tendency in our society to overthink things and complicate things with studies of like active chemical components of a plant and how to isolate and maximize components and all this stuff. And it's really opposite, in my opinion. It's easy. It's one way I just think about it is from the book of Matthew. There's a line in there that says, "Become like little children to enter the kingdom of heaven." And I think that things that are truly worth knowing are elementary at their foundation. You have a firm foundation to grow, and you'll always have something to come back to when you fall. And that's what I'd like to kind of put down here is a foundation of plant communication. And there's people in this world that live. There's people in this country, the Amish. Sometimes I'm like, dang, they're out there proving that living men and women can not live in a world of materialistic machinery and thrive. So what does it mean to communicate with nature? It's not a material thing. It's communication on its definition is immaterial and can never be materially verified. So therefore, communication is transcendental, and that includes the communication of the natural world.
I would add, in the current world that we find ourselves, people need to get back to what you're talking about because of what's about to happen. It may change. There could be an act of God, but the road that we are headed on, like the Amish, if you want to be free of what's going to be foisted forward, if they get what they're going, is going to require that you quit using the goods and services of the technocracy to some level, which means that you need to get back to your inheritance as a beneficiary of this creation. And when you opened up there talking about plants, in my mind, and I know it's not 100%, 90 some percent of all medicine that I've been familiar with that's real medicine comes from the plant kingdom. And there are other things too in alchemy that don't rely solely on the plant kingdom, but the majority of it is. And that brings us back to another thing that we've been separated from, which is the sky clock. I don't know, almost a year ago, I think we interviewed a guy who was big on bamboo, and here he was trotting out the information from his village-like area where, we know to cut the bamboo at this phase of the moon so it doesn't rot. And so here you are, an herbalist, and I'm guessing the sky clock means more to you than most. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah, definitely. In fact, today that we're recording is about 3 days past a new moon. And that means it's going to be the day that I'm going to be planting seeds in the garden. And I have a special way that I do it called signature seeding, which I'll talk about in a second. And so, yeah, even things like that, harvesting plants, there's an influence of the sky clock on plants. Let's say there's big Martian influences on a plant. And I'll harvest it on a Tuesday, for example, or when those Martian influences are there. So it's something that's always on my mind. And actually, the more you it's herbalism and learning these foundations is a really great way to accelerate all these other ways of learning about things. You can learn about the sky clock. You can learn about the plants. You can learn about healing. You can learn about plant communication, common sense, spiritual sense. And so, yeah, that's basically, I can just jump back in about common sense. That's what we're given to discern, what's right and wrong, good and bad, day and night. If the moon is high, if the moon is new, and just applying common sense, sharpening our senses, we just regain our ability to discern with clarity, with certainty, and find abundant medicine in the natural world.
Let's cue Jason up here before we do it. In the actual world, in the creation, there is a season for everything. There is a time for everything. And the technical world has made us all forget. your cell phone will work any day of the week, any second of the day. It doesn't give a damn what the season is, and so will the internet. And by the way, the grocery store will be giving you everything it ever gives you at any time of the year. Does not care that there is a season for everything. And this is how we began to separate. The problem is if the cell phone goes off, which it might, by the way, that's possible. And if your grocery store is no longer stocked, which could happen someday, guess what? All you have left is there's a season for everything. Those people who have been, I don't know how to call it, trampling on the natural truths that make this creation, that provide everything, they've been hacking it so that you can have an orange in any month. And when they quit hacking, or their ability to hack is impeded in some way, we're all back to the beginning, which cues Jason up pretty well.
Did we lose our capability to commune with nature?
I think we're talking a lot about sense, common sense, and it seems like there's a lot of common sense that's gone out the window in this world. But it's something that's inherent for everyone to regain again. Like I said, applying common senses. I have this. Let me talk about this compass I have in my mind. This is something that I use to discern a lot about communication with nature, and this is the foundation of a lot of things. So just picture in your mind. I call it the 4 directions of knowing. So picture in your mind in front of you a circle, like you're looking at a clock face, and you make an X shape through that circle. So you're dividing into 4 equal pie pieces. There's an axis at the center, and each one of these pie pieces represents the compass. There's north, south, east, and west. So if we were to bring our imagination to the right side of the clock face, or the right side of the compass in the east, we have the east is it has to do with the element of air. This is where the sun rises. This is where it's related to the season of spring. It's where we get new information. We plan our day. We have this imagination. It's related to the latest science on the horizon. And moving clockwise and throughout the year, we move into the south. This is the element of fire. This is the realm of the sun and summer. And it's where direct experience, it's the present. It's about clinical impressions. So we have east, future, south, present, west. That's the season of the fall. That's related to the element of water. And that's intuition, turning inwards, like aha moments, just inspiration like that. The north, we have the body of knowledge. This is related to earth and winter. And it's hard, and it's tradition, and it's text, and it's scriptures, and things that are handed down, and ancestral knowledge. And in each one of these directions, there's also, I think about, there's like the wizard or the wicked witch, or the wizard. I like the word wizard better, but it's like the inversion in that. And so in the east, you have the inversion of, imagination and science on the horizon is like scientism and like future, overcoming the present. In the south, the inversion would be like of the present and direct experience would be hypermaterialism and appetites of the flesh. And then the wizard of the west is base emotions and inability to reason instead of your intuition. And the north, those that invert the body of knowledge and tradition, are obscuring history and its dogma. And so my idea is that, when it comes to experience, I want to find myself right in the center of that axis. Each one of these seasons has particular qualities to them as well. Hot, dry, damp, and hot, cold, damp, and dry. And I want to be right in the center. And if I put myself if you take that clock face and you imagine it going down on a table. So now that's like a 2-dimensional like paper plate, I guess, if you will. And imagine just like poking a hole right through the center with a pencil so that it becomes a top or something like that you could spin around. And that's where I want to be. I want to be able to look around in all of these directions at 360 degrees. I want all of that information to come back to me, and I want to expand it outwards. And now what I've just created, and hopefully in your visual, in your mind, you can see a toroidal field. And that particular axis in the center where I want to be is the qualities of expansion and contraction. So we have now the 4 elements, and then we have the 4 qualities: hot, cold, damp, dry. And if we're in the center looking out, we have tension and relaxation, or moving outwards. Does that make sense?
Yeah, what you're beginning to point out is that this is all inclusive. And so as you're speaking, I'm trying to think of ways to tie it into a mind. But let me go back to the initial question. Did we lose our capability to commune with nature? No, we didn't. What we lost temporarily was our ability to give a damn about caring and knowing about nature. And so I think that's what you're getting into. But I mean, in just what you've laid down, that goes through every Buddhist tenet I've ever read, ancient Indian, every tenet I've ever read, the so-called luminaries that are called planets, those descriptions of hot, cold, damp, dry. That's you could describe Saturn with two of them, and you know it, and I know you know it. These things were known at a time, but to get back into it, Kyle, maybe we should say, how does a person start to reconnect? Most of us are disconnected. Most of us are stuck in a cell phone that doesn't give a damn what the season is. And the way I did it, and I think anyone can do it their own way, is I started years ago going, wait a minute, why is that plant the color it is? How come this plant has 5 petals on its flower and this one has more than I can count? And then I began to put it together. I realized that knowing something of cymatics showed me that everything is vibration. Everything, every single thing can be described as vibration, as Walter Russell puts forward in the Universal One. It's that one idea that this foundation creates everything. So what I began to do was look at the color, and I would say, well, that's a blue. Did that blue require white or black on that flower to get to its shade? Well, it's light blue, so it required white. That's a spiritual idea. And then I would start to think, is that a higher vibration or a lower vibration based on those simple tenets? And then I would come to something like a thistle that is so complex. There are so many things going on. You know, instantly that plant has to be a high vibration, and it's a very dark purple, telling me that black was added to that hue. But at the base of it all, I know it's vibration. So the reason I'm pointing all this out, Kyle, is in an effort, each of us can go out and start to reconnect, and each of us will probably do it differently. But what do you think about trying to wrap your head around it in the way I just did?
Yeah. So everybody's find something that interests you outside in the natural world. And like I said, I think that this is a great way to reconnect with our creator. So you want to discern that, you want to discern your spirituality. Maybe it's a practical matter for you. You want to just, it's all about utility. You want to grow your food better. You want to make sure your family's taken care of. There's all kinds of, like I said, there's all kinds of ways of getting back to it. But if anyone's listening now to your show, I'm guessing that everyone's aware of the potential for, like the grocery stores closing down and stuff like that. I don't want to lay down that we have to, go join the Amish and everything like that. We can take baby steps and make our world a better place through reconnecting with the natural world. And I'm not talking about, the worship of nature either. I'm talking about finding our place within it and knowing our creator in that way. And yeah, I agree. Absolutely. We could talk about Paracelsus, because you mentioned the vibrational patterns and stuff like that. And I think that's Paracelsus was a historical figure from the early 1600s. And he compiled many books, including one called The Signature of All Things, and coined this phrase, the doctrine of signatures, which I use a lot. And I basically, the relevance between him in his particular period and ours parallels our own quite a bit, actually. He was a troublemaker. He was around the same time as the Reformation that was happening, the Protestant Reformation. And he had he was a physician and a troublemaker of a physician. There was an established paradigm of his time, and it relied on the body of knowledge and empiricism. And basically what he was doing was rejecting that. He was saying, there's nothing wrong with scientific method and stuff, but basically what you're doing is telling me to reject the senses that I'm getting from my own common sense and my own eyes and my own impressions. And the authorities would hate him. They would run him out of town. If he was alive today, his YouTube would be canceled for sure. The people loved him though, because he was a healer and he could heal them. And he had a huge reputation for his ability to heal. And, the historical accuracy of Paracelsus is a little dicey because he was a big enemy of a lot of people, and a lot of, his name wasn't even Paracelsus. It was actually Theophrastus Bombastus Philippus Aurelius von Hohenheim.
Say that 3 times fast.
The name Paracelsus was kind of an insult, but it stuck. And but anyway, he's he's rejecting the status quo. He's traveling all around. He enlists in all of these armies. Basically, he just wants to travel, and he wants to learn from the people. And he wants to learn from the farmers and the peasants and the sorcerers. And joins basically any army in Europe and marches all around from Italy to Northern Europe and Britain and to Moscow. He gets captured by the Tartarians and maybe even initiated in some shamanic ceremonies there, who knows. And he goes to Egypt and studies with the Greeks and studies in Turkey, and this is where alchemy and the Hermeticism was kind of coming back into this time. And so he's compiling all of this stuff into basically learning healing from the non-academics and just disregarding the academics at the time, and kind of comes up with this principle, this idea that, wow, you don't need to have a body of knowledge in order to learn how to heal. You don't need to have, the word body of knowledge is like that word can be even, it's a play on words too, right? But anyway, you can use your empiricism. You can use your spiritual sight and your common senses, and develop the understanding of nature through these things. One of them is called a signature, the doctrine of signatures. And it's basically, a signature is, the word nature is in it. It's sig, it means labeled nature. So it's actually a signature is a fiat in its own, the word itself. It's like, let it be known in nature. A practical application. It's a practical application of the doctrine of correspondence. So as within, so without, made in the image of our creator, all that. And the idea is that the shape, the color, the appearance, the environmental niche, the taste, the smell, etc., all of that of a plant or a natural substance will display the telltale signs and configurations, how it can be used in medicine. For instance, yellow plants that appear like bile, they might be useful for the liver, and red plants are medicine for the blood, purple plants for blood infections, etc. The shape is also an important feature, and so on and so on. And so he's got a cool quote. He says, "The virtue is signed in the form, figure, corpus, and substance, that through the signature the interior may be opened, and the wisdom and the virtue may be made known." And I think of the signature, or the doctrine of signatures, the signatures of the natural world, as octaves of creation. Like you were saying, Crow, like vibration. It's different densities of the vibration that materialize, and they're all from a similar octave. Like the creator manifests similar forms and functions with these. And I like to think of it this way. Like in the Psalms of David, he addresses the chief musician. I love that. And here, if you don't mind, I'm going to give a little example here. I have this string here. This is a vibration that when played, let's just say, for example, for the sake of example, that when sung into existence, this right here becomes a Ginkgo Biloba tree. And that Ginkgo Biloba tree, with its shape and form, from a distance, it looks like the inside of a lung. If you look closer up, it looks like the alveoli of the lung. And if you take a really close look at the leaf itself, it looks like a brain with 2 hemispheres. And then this note, when played, is the lungs of a human, of a living person. And then this note, when played, this is where we can access memory. And then this note, when played, is our circulation. And then this is the octave of creation, an example that the chief musician is playing. He's going like this. So that's kind of how I think of it. Like, it's just different vibrational frequencies that are harmonic, that are resonating, and they are condensing in different patterns, but we're able to understand them and see them, not just by tuning our common senses and the material senses, but also tuning our spiritual senses and being able to see something from a distance and say, that's good for my lungs. That's good for my memory. how did I know that? I've never seen a brain in real life because I'm a farmer or something like that. But we just know, we know these things. And that's what logos is. It's the creation of these things. And additionally, each harmonic, each string that I just played there, it has a harmonic impact on the other strings. It might not be audible, but if I tapped that first string there, it's going to vibrate the other strings a little bit. To an untrained ear, you can't really perceive it, but if you get close enough, you can see it. And that's the idea that I'm trying to show here, is that we can tune ourselves to all of, not only what those vibrations mean, and each one isolated, but how they also resonate with the others.
Perfect.
All those juicy harmonics are also why analog things sound better than digital things, generally speaking.
Oh, that's a good point, because that is part of nature to have the harmonic. It's not being synthesized. But Dylan, pick up your guitar and play an open A note. And we'll make the example to try to illustrate the era that we're in. So let's just say that the open A note he's going to play represents human consciousness. So grab just the note, open A. All right. So that's where we were 100 years ago. Go up to the double dot and play the same note an octave higher. Now play the original that you just came from. All right. So that lower note was our consciousness at some point. Play the double dot an octave higher. This is where we're headed right now. So it's the exact same note, but what's happened is we've moved up an octave, and I'm pretty sure Kyle could point out things about the luminaries. Like, this is the idea of those outer luminaries that, for my money, don't really apply so much to us right now, called Neptune and Uranus. That's why they're octaves higher than we are. We're not quite there yet to receive that high octave, but the description you just gave is perfect. It proves that vibration is under it all. And then you did kind of a demonstration of how you could look at it.
Yeah, how we can look at it, how we could not just look at it, how we can hear it, how we can touch it, how we can see it and smell it, and use all of our senses to be absorbed in the vibrational experience that is condensed into this material world. And also, once we see and hear and smell and all these things, then we start to say, I want to know what else I can do with this instrument of mine. And that's what I really like to do, is not just teach these base senses, or as Brandon Big Sib calls, the serpent sense, which is, under the jurisdiction of the material world, but also the spiritual sense, and being able to understand and comprehend the meaning of things, not just, the uses of plants, but their virtues. And I really like to reframe that, and not just, I'm talking about plants in particular here, but this could be anything in the natural world, not like, how do we use it? Because I could think about, how would you use me? Like, but instead, if you want to develop a relationship with me, then you start to think about my virtues and not just what I'm useful for. And that's what I really like to do. And when I teach about plant medicine as well, is that in our kind of give me paradigm that we have here, the word use is something that we oftentimes talk about with the plants. But I think about virtues and what do they mean? Why are they here? What else do they have to offer? Is there things that they can offer us without us even ingesting them? And there's a quote in Matthew I just read about, like, so you're just going to go into the wilderness, and I'm just paraphrasing here, but it's like, you're going to go into the wilderness and just look at a reed blowing in the wind, because what Jesus was saying at that time is there's so much more than just looking at things and beholding things. We can find meaning and true meaning in our life, as well as connecting in this way with the natural world.
There's a lot of talk about, and this is a little off track, but it's within your sphere. Cannabis gets brought up all the time. We had Fortune on not too long ago. And it's an unfortunate thing to talk about, because cannabis is a plant. It's quite important. At one time, it is my comprehension that it made up a major portion of actual naturopathic healing, not too far back, maybe in the early 1900s. But in the way it's been used recently, a lot of it's been just to make you high and lazy. And the real truth is that it is one amazing plant. And the reason I'm bringing this up is I know a lot of people who grow cannabis, and what I notice is they have made the connection back to nature. They love that plant. They work every day to understand that plant, to become simpatico, to learn all the plant can teach them about where they want to go with the plant. And it is probably one of the communities at the highest level of trying to tune into what nature is offering that I'm aware of, the people growing cannabis, because of their intense interest in the plant. And what I notice is their spiritual world changes when they start to try to make that connection with the plant they're growing.
One of the things that I like to teach about is the plants are here for a reason. And sometimes we can get really idealistic and be like, wow, there's so many cool things to learn about, so much plants. But one of the things that I really want to say is go outside and find 5 plants within 500 feet. There's a reason why these plants are within this environment that you are sharing. Find 5 plants within 500 feet. And sometimes they pop up in the spring. They're there in the spring for a reason. Sometimes they pop up in the summer. They're in the summer for the reason. Sometimes we harvest their roots in the fall because it's a reason. There's a reason for that. And learn these 5 plants really, really well. And if you know 5 plants within 500 feet of your house, you can probably heal just about anything that comes your way because they are sharing the same environmental stressors as you. And they are abundant. And I'm not talking about plants that, we have to import from, some exotic location or some mountain town that we have to exploit the, indigenous population or something to get them. Just talking about our own weeds, basically. And then as far as marijuana and cannabis and that's concerned, we got some property up it's like on the border of Upper Peninsula in Wisconsin, and I live in Wisconsin. And we're going to be building, and there's some guys that actually listen to this podcast, and they're going to help me create a hempcrete home, which is basically hemp fibers. So industrial applications of the plant, So when people hear cannabis, they draw the little leaf on their notebooks in middle school and stuff like that, and listen to rap and stuff. There's so much more to this plant. It's really, really cool. All the things that you can do with it, the regenerative qualities that it has and everything like that. And when you start to learn about that, because it's a really popular plant, it's famous, it has a lot of energy, zeitgeist energy into it. Well, once you get past that and you can say, holy moly, I know, and you start learning about other plants, you're like, wow, a lot of plants are like that. A lot of plants have the same regenerative quality. A lot of them can be used for textiles. Stinging nettle can make great textiles and cordage, and has some of the similar healing qualities as cannabis too, and so on and so on. It's really, really cool once you just start, instead of taking what you're learning from books and everything like that, just be in the world. Just be not of the world. Just go out there and see what kind of gifts have been brought our way and learn about them and be immersed in them. And that's really fun too.
Ask and you shall receive, right? There's a truth in that. You can literally go out and talk to a plant and say, hey, I want to learn about you. Help me out. I'm going to start paying attention now. I'm going to start looking at your colors and how you grow and when you grow. And the thing about cannabis, and everyone should realize this, why was it that cannabis was chosen to be socially engineered? In something like the early 20s, there were fields and fields upon fields of hemp growing because there was nothing better to make rope out of. As a matter of fact, when I was a roadie, the Spreckles Theater, which they call a hemp house, still had natural hemp rope, and it was for a reason. They never replaced the hemp rope with new nylon synthetic. That hemp house always had more hemp rope to replace the old hemp rope. And it was more than just tradition, the reason they did it. Now, at some point, all of a sudden, the hemp fields are gone. Here comes the social engineering. At some point, you can't have a joint anymore. That's illegal. You're going to get arrested if that. Then at some point, it gets reintroduced with drug culture and music. Do you see? It's such an amazing plant. I mean, amazing. If you compare cannabis to almost any other plant I know, it is mind-blowingly complex and amazing. And the things you can do with it are nearly endless, from healing to building.
Yep, definitely. We can know about it. Let's go into learning. How would we learn about this plant? What it can do by just using our 5 senses. So common sense, of course, when using 5 senses, not to and trying to find things out about plants. I don't want you to poison yourself. Understand it's not a poisonous plant if you're going to try this with any plant that you find. And also just a little disclaimer, this is just information. It's not any of the stuff that we get into the realm of like medicine and stuff like that. It's not medical advice. So just by tasting a plant, if you went up to a cannabis and just tasting it without knowing anything about the plant, I've never seen it before. I could taste it and I could tell you what this plant would be indicated for. I could tell you why it would be contraindicated. I could smell it. I can do the same thing. And this is known as organoleptic testing. And there's our earthly senses. And I'm grounding a beginning that with a caveat that, if we're limiting ourselves to putting too much emphasis on the world, but I really want to invite the idea of bringing in the spiritual senses as well. But anyway, organoleptic tasting, organoleptic senses. There's some herbal companies that are on the radar in the FDA, and they are familiar with the machine called a spectrometer. And the spectrometer is basically something that's a fancy device. You put, let's say, a drop of a tincture formula, and it shines some lights through a prism, and it beeps and it boops and records the variations, and then it cross-references with an already compiled database. It provides the names of like the chemical constituents and alkaloids and polyphenols and all this really boring stuff like that. But basically, it's like looking at the parts of a whole and assuming that the parts are what are the quote unquote active ingredients, or the parts are what make it the whole, or the cause of the reaction. And what it doesn't tell you is what plants are there. This herbal company that I'm talking about, it was kind of audited by the FDA. And when they said that they could tell with greater accuracy, and they tested this, that the contents of their formulas blindly, they would take a tincture bottle, look at it, taste it, and say exactly what plants were in there. Having a mental catalog of this, not a pre-recorded catalog, but a mental catalog of the energetic patterns. This is through experience. And they were successful. And the FDA had no choice but to concede that the organoleptics that we can develop ourselves are a valid way of testing goods. And it's not an appeal to authority with the FDA. I don't really care. But I just mentioned it as an example of the limitations of technology and the ways that we can exceed this with ourselves, with what we can learn. The base level gifts. And it's not about memorizing what is written. This is the thing I like to teach about. It's not about memorizing what is written. That's what Paracelsus was also against. He was saying, look, I want to be able to know something. Maybe I've read that like ginger, I've heard that ginger is good for tummy aches, right? And, I have a tummy ache. I know that ginger is good for it. I read it somewhere, but I also read in that article that it was like not good for some people's tummy aches, or I can't remember which ones. I'm scratching my head because I'm appealing to this authority or this resource that I read. Instead, I'm talking about basing information on visceral knowledge, developing relationships with the plants, with natural world through experience, knowing the conditions of what we're working with, learning the patterns, learning the conditions that are presented, recognizing them as patterns, as energetic patterns, the things that we're dealing with.
I noticed we can make a distinction here. Maybe all the things that you've been talking about are based on a foundational thought pattern based on the 4 elements: fire, water, earth, and air. If we want to get magical, we can talk about the 5th, which most people call ether. But Let's stick to the 4. By the way, the number 4 is the stablest of numbers, which is why, of course, your evening news uses the number 4 to encode death. It's the flip side of stability, would be instability. We live in a world of duality, so they take the negative tack. But there are 4 elements, there are 4 cardinal directions, there are 4 seasons. Do you see how this all fits in? And Dylan may go to other systems that use different numbers, but it's the same idea all over. But here's the point. In the way that you're thinking about this, you kind of have to think in the elemental way, don't you? Have you ever heard of scientists saying, well, we want to do this scientific procedure, but we've got to wait for spring? Doesn't work that way. They don't care. The whole point of science is not to care what season it is. Occasionally they may say, well, it's frozen, so we can't do this thing we want to do. We've got to wait for things to thaw. But with the elemental system, the season is the foundation, right? And that really is a stark underpinning to where you're going using your visceral talents as opposed to, I guess you were describing ideas of science.
Yeah, exactly. And so, yeah, just come back to my compass of knowing again. We got our 4 seasons. Each one of those crosses between those seasons represents a quality. So we have our 4 elements: earth, air, fire, water. And then in between each one, we have hot, cold, damp, dry. And if we're standing in the middle, and we're not talking about our 5th element here, but we're talking about the movement between each one of these qualities, I say tense and relaxed. Or if I make it easy, I make 1-syllable words for each one: hot, cold, damp, dry, tense, lax. Hot, I'm not talking about the temperature of the plant. I could stick a thermometer in a cayenne pepper and a thermometer and a cucumber, and they're going to be the same reading. But I'm talking about something that's increasing our activity, or something that's exciting.
Elevating vibration, maybe a way to say that?
Yeah, that's a great way of saying it. I never thought of it that way. But these are fractal patterns, by the way. They're not about, you find them in the tissues, you find them in the seasons, you find them in the greater ages, you find them in the person's personality, you find them in the times of the day. So we got hot, increased vibration; cold, decreased vibration or depression. There's damp, which is the stagnation of fluid. It's also called stagnation. There's dry. That's the lack of fluid. Sometimes that's called atrophy. There's tense. That's constriction. That's the middle of the vortex coil. That's tension. And then there's lax, or the lack of containment, relaxation, the expansion of energy, or the entropy of the barrier that holds it and binds it. That's relaxation. So those are based off the 4 elements, and I add those qualities to, I call them the 6 tissue states. But those 4 elements you'll find all around the world, foundational principles from which to build on and which to come back to, from Ayurvedic medicine in India, one of the oldest passed down forms of medicine. We have from Chinese medicine, uses 5 elements, but these 4 elements are there. There's the Greek humoral system, which was really informative to the medicine of the West, all around. And even any indigenous culture will know that there are, these 4 elements. They're based on the seasons, and they're not theoretical. They're what are in the world.
Provable.
Absolutely.
So maybe we should have Kyle talk about a few of his products that are really, really good, especially the stuff that Rose has had so much success with.
Yeah.
And one of
Definitely.
the things I could say is the throat spray he sent me, fantastic, because obviously I speak a lot and also I sing, and it just massages the old vocal cords into happiness.
Oh, the magic gullet, you mean? Yeah. So it's funny, like in my field, I can't make claims. This is really fun. I love being in honor and not making claims. You can't make medicinal claims. It's at first when I started learning about this stuff, I was like, oh man, I really want to call it like throat healer spray or something like that. But you can't make these claims. So I come up with creative ways and think of puns to name my products that conveys the idea of what they do without explicitly making the claims. And so that's really fun. So there's the magic gullet. We talked about the super berries, or the buried treasure, it's called, the super berry cider. One of the alternate names for that was berry maybe cider, but I decided to go with buried treasure. So I make a ton of different medicines. My wife and I, we own an herbal business in Milwaukee, and we go out and we forage, and we bring plants back to our apothecary, and we process them, and we make them into all kinds of things, from teas to tinctures to I make my own incense. We make our own. I use vinegar a lot as a solvent because I really love vinegar as well, and salves and everything like that. And we work with local farmers. I'll ask local farmers to grow things. And a lot of our products are just handled by 1 or 2 people before they're put into the bottle. I really like to make an emphasis on, the quality of the plants, spiritually, cultivating the spiritual space, the psychic space, burning some incense, chanting, praying. I pray to my products. I ask them to go to the people that they need to go to. There's a Sanskrit chant that I do in my heart.
Dr. Emoto, anyone? You see where this is going?
Oh, I love his work too.
embedding that goodly intention into the liquid?
It's so important. I'll kick somebody out of the kitchen that, that I think has a bad attitude.
The cooler. It's like that movie, The Cooler, the guy with the bad attitude.
Yeah, exactly. I haven't seen that one, but yeah, that's the thing. I could feel it. I could feel it too. When you're operating in a space with love and high principles and healing and doing something that you love, working with your hands too, I think is so important to work with your hands and put this intention into your hands. And then, so we have that. We have an herbs shop in Milwaukee, which is beautiful. If you're ever in Southeast Wisconsin, come by. I do a lot of classes. I do herbal programs all year long. And then I have an online store that you could find stuff at too. And I also do consultations, consult with people. I make custom formulas every day. So if there's somebody listening that needs something in particular, then let me know. I'll be happy to help you. I don't charge for consultations. Either. I have it's a donation based thing. But I usually just do like 20 minutes or something like that. We talk, and then it's kind of based on, let me see if I want to make the best recommendation. I want to make sure that I can make something that helps you. And I found that like if people just grab things willy nilly, then sometimes it doesn't work, and sometimes people just need a little guidance. And it's also amazing how the people's intuition too. Like they'll pick up something, and they'll bring it to me, and they'll say, "Hey, what is this? What is this good for?" And I'll say, all these things that this plant has been traditionally used for, and they're like looking at me like, yep, check. That's exactly what I needed, but they don't have any idea. And it's amazing that like people can gravitate towards something based off of, I don't know how it feels or I don't know how it is, but I love the intuitive process too. So if that's why I think that's how Rose was guided through healing in our shop. She just went online and got some of our stuff. And if she would have talked to me before, I probably would have recommended other things, but and I'm glad I didn't, because I want to give Rose a lot of credit for her intuition. And that's the other thing too. And I think that people can develop these things of knowing what they need, and maybe not even needing to know why or the logic behind it or anything like that, but just being like, that's what I need right now. And that's pretty cool.
As far as I know, correct me if I'm wrong, Jason, those products have given Rose the biggest help that I'm aware of.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That was the whole point. She absolutely really improved, especially with her stomach. She started taking, actually multiples of things several times a day for weeks. And the last time she got an internal scan, she was totally healed. And she'd like to think that it, at least in somewhat, has to do with this.
So now that I'm getting back into the swing of things, and the moment you had sent me the products and I'd heard from Rose, I want to put up a sponsorship link from the website. So why not ask it on the air? Normally we do this off the air, but are you set up so we could do a sponsorship link off an image from each of my episodes?
Sure. Yeah, that'd be cool. I'll even throw a discount in for Crow listeners too.
Cool. We'll talk about this off the air. I'll need a link and we'll set it up so it can be tracked. So I just want to close out with a little Paracelsus, because I had to walk outside while you were doing the conversation. So everybody knows, even in Paracelsus's name, there's an interesting bit of information. It basically means para and then Celsus. So it means, as I understand it, equal to or better than some dude that lived before named Celsus, who was a master, known high up master of alchemy back in the day. So Paracelsus's name, typically when they master it, they give themselves, it often becomes a Latin name, actually, in the era we know about. So I was reading some Paracelsus, and by the way, a lot of it is difficult reading for people that aren't used to it. And that was the first time I ever heard, and I don't remember the plants off the top of my head, but some guy was going to make a spagyric with, I think it was basil. And in the text the guy was reading, it said, but if you really want to get all the bang for your buck, you want to plant that basil, and I think it was rosemary, I could be wrong, next to a rosemary. And it said, because there is a simpatico between those two plants, which will boost what you're trying to do with the basil. And by the way, you should have planted that basil at this time, and you'll want to watch the phases of the moon until you're ready, which will need to be harvested at this time. Then when you process that, it goes on and on and on. And I think this bears outlining, because we can operate at the level we are as we learn again, But there is a level of specificity, which we still have records for through people like Paracelsus, that border on magical when you've hit the nail on the head down to the moment in each aspect of what you've done, to include what that plant was growing next to. And I've also read things like, well, that particular dandelion is almost always found growing next to this other thing you think is a weed. And there's a reason for that. And I think these ideas, you need to consider what's going on in nature, and that's typically what we overlook. But in Paracelsus's time, they were close to nature, and they probably had spiritual vision. What are we talking, 1600s? That's about the time we lost it, I think.
Yep, that's right, 1600s.
So anything else you want to add, or should we give out contact and prep up for hour 2?
Yeah, let's prep for hour 2. I want to jump in and we'll talk about our discernment of the senses, and we'll go from there. We'll talk, and we'll even use some plants for particular examples and talk about these senses in detail. And so, yeah, find me at tippecanoeherbs.com, TIPPECANOE herbs, HERBS.com, and tippecanoeherbs@gmail.com, or herbalist bear on the Crow and Bear Terraria times.
All right, so everybody knows there will be a new 100 by 150, those little images. It will be on the bottom row, just above the episode image. It's under the audio player, but just above the episode image, the Tippy Canoe link that gets you 10% off whatever we land on here will be at the bottom. And if you click on that, you'll know you came from here, and you'll get the benefit of having the reduction in price. I really liked how you brought the guitar in. And the reason is because I'm aware of it. But when I'm sitting here with my headphones on and I heard it, your brain switches over and you're able to think in a different way. So I think it's a good way to go. Jason, anything you want to get in before we wrap up and get ready for hour 2?
Well, I hate to sound like a commercial, but I do want to say how much I have enjoyed the multiple products I've used by these fine folks. They definitely are on the right path.
My wife has had asthma problems most of her life, and there were 2 or 3 things that Kyle sent me. And I mean, it was less than a day that the breathing had improved. And I was like honor with the little berry juice we were talking about. I'm telling her, that's not a Slurpee. you're just supposed to take a tablespoon, or a teaspoon a couple times a day. She's over there. This is so good. I want to drink it. I don't think that's,
But unlike a pharmaceutical, it won't make you puke, shit, die.
No, none of that. But it was just that good. That's what I'm referencing. Anyhow, let's wrap up and prep for hour 2. So that is hour 1 of episode 410 with Kyle Denton and Jason Lindgren. And everyone should check out Tippy Canoe. The products are not just top notch, but the person putting them together knows some things. And there's where the rubber meets the road. People like Fortune. That's the whole thing there. The intent and the knowing in the individual is really far beyond the icing on top of the cake. I hope everyone will join us for hour 2 at Crow777radio.com, CRROW777radio.com. And I'd like to wish everybody in the entire world a happy, healthy, and higher-minded new era. Cheers.
Belief is the enemy of knowing.